Are you wondering how much getting divorced is actually going to cost you? Has your ex told you, leave the lawyers out of it because it will just get too expensive? Have you heard the horror stories where someone spent $750,000 on legal fees, while somebody else tells you that they've already spent $20,000 on legal fees and nothing's even happened yet? So now you're sitting there wondering, how much is going to cost you? And why is it costing some people lots of money and other people not much? All you really want is just someone to sit down and finally break down where the money goes, what realistically you need to budget for, and why some divorces do cost a few $1,000s while others cost hundreds of thousands. Well, then today's episode will be perfect for you, because today we're going to be talking about the real costs for normal people facing divorce and de facto separation, including legal fees, negotiation fees, mediation fees, disclosure, and any other hidden expenses that nobody warned you about until it's too late. We're also going to be talking about the biggest ways people waste money during divorce and how you can approach this process strategically and be smarter about how you spend your money from the very beginning. Welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura. Hello, everyone.
So it's something that scares everybody, Mother, the cost of divorce. And I think we've all heard the horror stories.
Yes.
But before we get started, just a reminder, Mum and I will be talking about the cost of legal fees in Australia. However, there will be strategies in there for people who aren't in Australia, but please just make sure you double check your lawyer, legal fees, etc. And reminder, Mum is not your lawyer. I am not a lawyer. And we are just here discussing costs and legal fees.
What else is there to do this morning, Laura?
Let's get to the jingle and let's get started. Hello, I'm Laura, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. Mum, to just realistically, the big 3, I think, the big 3 people here is my divorce cost me hundreds, thousands of dollars. That's one of the big 3. The other ones is I lost my children, or my children, I don't see them, or something about kids is another one. And the other one is I didn't get anything in my divorce. But the cost is one of the big 3 that seems to be discussed about by everyone. And it seems to be a barrier for a lot of people to getting a cheaper, fairer way through, where either they just don't do it at all because they're so terrified, they think they can't afford it, or they do go in, boots and all, and end up spending all their money on it and getting nothing in their property settlement because it all goes to the lawyers.
And no matter if you're thinking about separating, or if you've just separated, or if it's children or property or both, the costs come into all of those factors. And I think it comes into your decision-making early on. And I hate to think that there are people stuck in bad relationships because they don't think they can afford to have a property settlement moving forward. And no, if there are ways to not spend as much, but I think it's frightening. It's frightening for people.
Also, people need to understand that, like you said, Mum, it's divorce, it's property settlement, and children's matters. And you're not just paying for that paperwork, you're also paying for the negotiations, you're paying if there's any delays, you're paying for reactions, you're paying for court. So there's so many things that you pay for. So we're going to go through them kind of step by step so people can get an understanding. But are there any main misconceptions you think people have about legal costs that you want to just
put in there?
Yeah.
Just people think they have no control or no rights to discuss legal costs, right? They feel like once they put their foot in a lawyer's door, it all runs away on them and they have no control. And I'd like to say to people, if that's you, if you think that's going to happen, well, there are ways and we can talk to you about those. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, well, let's get to the divorce itself. So that is a thing. So if you're de facto and you're separating, you don't have to worry about the cost of this. But just the actual divorce application is probably, I would say, the cheapest part of the whole thing. Wouldn't you say so, Mum?
It absolutely is. So you can do it yourself. You can do it online. You just pay the legal fees, as long as it's not disputed in any way by the other person about how long you've been separated. But yes, so that has remained, I think, one of the most affordable parts of family law.
And it's probably the easiest part because let's face it, as you've always said, you can apply for a divorce by yourself. You don't need your ex to do a joint divorce. There's no American movie where they're running away and not signing the paper and they just want to get a divorce. That doesn't happen in Australia. We don't have that.
And I still hear people when I talk to them, though, sometimes say they won't give me a divorce. And I want my message to the listeners, if you think someone won't give you a divorce, hell, just you take your divorce, you do your divorce, and they can throw a tantrum for all they like. If one of you has decided that the marriage has no hope of getting back together again and you've been separated for 12 months, then the court will grant you your divorce.
Now, I don't want you to all have a heart attack, and we are saying it's the cheapest part, but I've just looked it up and this is in May 2026. So if you're listening to this later, it could be different. And I know we've done an episode similar to this maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it definitely wasn't this price back then. But an application for divorce costs, if you just do the paperwork and file it all yourself, is $1,125 currently on the family law website for Australia. If you have a reason to get a concession for payment for family law filing fees, and we can talk about that later as one of your strategies, it's $375.
Oh, so you're talking about the filing fees.
Just that alone.
Yeah, those are the fees the court charges for you to file anything. And I can remember when it was $43. Can I just say the lawyer's fees, what they call scale costs for that, they're entitled to a no child under 18, about $766 for the lawyer themselves, right?
To draft up the application.
To draft up, not have to go to court. Okay.
Right.
But like I said, you can do that bit yourself. So I don't think people should worry that much. What happens is you're trotting along through your case, right? And the other lawyer might write to your lawyer and say, oh, do you have instructions to accept service for divorce? Because divorce is separate to property and all the other stuff the court does. Now, it's almost a knee-jerk reaction for the lawyer to say, oh, yes, but then they're going to have to charge you to write back. They're going to charge you to read the divorce. And suddenly they're in there and it's costing you money. So if nothing else, if anyone ever says, do I have instructions to accept your divorce on your behalf, you go no. Say no. And then you can sort of get it through yourself. Most people don't even have to go to court anymore. It's mostly done in chambers.
So, literally, there is a cost to just put it into the court to get it done.
Yes.
And then the cost for a lawyer to do it, that's just a guide, that cost.
Oh, yeah, no one charges that much. It's always hourly rate, much more.
So, everyone usually charges much more. So, there's the fee that you have to pay even if you did do it yourself, but then there's also the lawyer's costs of that. That's about $2,500 just there, I would say. But just big red mark around that. You can be divorced and still be fighting over property and kids. So that's a completely separate thing. But ironically, that seems to be the cheapest thing out of all of it. And the reason for that is because you don't really fight over it.
Good point, Laura. You don't really fight over it. And don't forget, you may be able to have an exemption or a reduction in fees.
Negotiation costs, Mum. That's where most property and kids matters can be negotiated. They don't need to go to court. They don't need to go to mediation. You can have lawyers or you can talk to your ex and kind of sort it out yourselves. Potentially, negotiations could be the place where you guys get to and you don't have to get any further. So let's look at that.
Okay.
Because negotiating, it still costs money if you've got lawyers because it's letters, it's reviewing offers, it's meeting with your lawyer, it's phone calls, and it's drafting your consent orders. If you don't know what a consent order is, Mum, can you just do a quick summary of that?
There are two sorts of orders the court can make. One after a trial and they announce the judgment. The other sort of order is where you and your ex agree. You file a document in the court and you say, please make an order and these are the orders we want. The court looks at it to see if it is just and equitable, if it's property, or if it's in the best interests of the children, if it's children, and stamp that and send it back to you. And you still have an order that's as powerful as if you had a 3-day trial, but you haven't had to go through all that drama.
Okay. Why then is the negotiation part so expensive?
I reckon it's because people don't want to go to court, so they string it out a bit. They keep giving the other party more chances. or it's because it can take as long and be as expensive as either you or your ex make it, right?
Right.
It comes down to the personalities of the people, right? So I think sometimes, like, one person might drip feed disclosure to the other side. And I hear that has been suggested to people to do, so as to run up legal fees for the other side. I would hate to think any of our people would ever do that, any of our listeners.
And we're going to get to the disclosure part a little bit later. But so what you're basically saying is, unfortunately, when it comes to negotiation, there's a lot of emotion involved.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, they just want to fight, and that we've got those personality types, high conflict, that negotiation is going to be expensive. Manipulative, controlling, negotiation is going to be expensive, probably on purpose.
Yes.
Amicable might be okay, might not be too expensive, but still, it's still going to cost, because we're going to go through what they cost in a minute. And avoidant is expensive too, because you're still trying to get their attention. And so let's have a look, Mum. How much does it cost then in the negotiation phase for letters, to getting a lawyer to write a letter?
Okay, so your average cost, I think, at the moment with lawyers are around, let's say, $660. Okay, I'm hearing of over $1,000 an hour. I'm hearing of some at $400 now. So there you go. That's an hour. Okay, if the letter is a fairly brief letter, such as saying to the other side, "Thank you, we've got your documents. We'll get instructions. We'll get back to you later." That's going to be maybe on $660 now. It's going to be $66 because that's 6-minute unit. If it's a long letter, right, several pages that may need a couple of redrafts, then that letter could cost you $1,500 to $2,000 by the time it's drafted. And you get to look at it, amendments get made. So you want to make all your letters meaningful. Do you know?
Yeah.
Meaningful.
That's a letter.
That's a letter. Yeah.
All right. So one letter.
Can cost
what
that.
about phone calls?
People hardly ever do phone calls anymore. If you're ringing your lawyer, they'll talk to you. But gone are the days, I think, where we would automatically ring up the other lawyer and say, "How can we sort this out for these people?"
But how much is a phone call?
Well,
if you're speaking to,
if your lawyer's $660 an hour and you ring up for 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 6 minutes, it's going to be $66. But if it's longer than that, if it's 1 minute longer, most lawyers then add another $66 for that, because it's 6 minutes or part thereof. So you could find yourself, if you ring up and spend a bit of time getting some advice, giving some input, talking about it, wringing your hands or whatever, you could very quickly end up spending $660 on that phone call, or $330 if it's half an hour.
What about when you go into a lawyer and you want to get them to review an offer? Your ex has sent you an offer. How much do lawyers charge to review?
Okay, so that varies, because if they are prepared in a lower cost 1 hour interview, like a lot of firms offer, if you take in your document and ask them to run their eye over it, some people will do that. Some lawyers will do that. They don't have to put their name, say, on a certificate to say they've given you advice, but they can just give you broad brush stuff in that half an hour. And that might be $200, $300, $400. But there are lawyers rather go on the record and want to see all of the disclosure and all of that before they'll do that sort of thing. So you really need to find someone who will do that step in, step out for you.
Oh, no, I was just talking about what if you have to meet them to review?
Assuming the meeting is by Zoom, you'll at least save yourself parking fees.
Yeah.
And it'll be the same rate of fee. And it'll be the same whether they're in court talking on your behalf or whether they're talking to you about a proposal or an offer, or whether they're on the phone or drafting a letter. Most people have the same, their hourly rate extends all the way across.
Okay, so what about drafting consent orders? Is that different, or would they just charge you an hourly rate as well?
Same. Most people will do the same.
How long does it take to draft consent orders?
Golly, Rose, that's a very hard question, Laura, but I suppose our listeners want to know. So I'm going to take a wild sort of suggestion here, and it may or may not match with other people's experiences, but in my 40 years or so, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks from scratch. If you've got to take all that information from the client and then draft and then redraft the application and then get it into the court, and the court may take another 4 or 6 weeks after that.
So how much would that cost you?
Some people offer a fixed fee. So it used to be about probably 4 hours of drafting altogether for the lawyer. And so that's
what
going
would
to
that
be 2,400 plus 240 GST. So
Right.
2,640. And that'll include writing a letter to the court about justice and equity, or whether the orders are in the best interests of the children. And it will also include liaising with the other lawyer to get that letter signed.
Well, I'm looking around and I can see fixed fees around $4,000 to do your consent orders. But remembering, though, that it's not just making your consent orders. You have to meet with them. You have to provide them all the information. You have to get all of the documentation in. You have to have had the discussions so they know what to write.
Yes.
So that's something that people need to keep in the back of their head to create consent orders. It's about that.
Because that's the tail end of the process. It's the tail end, and it doesn't really recognise all of the negotiations that have gone on before.
Well, let's get into that. So let's talk about disclosure, because you talked about that before. And disclosure, to me, from what I have heard, have all nearly largely said the same thing, and that is disclosure has cost them a lot of money, or that it's a painstaking issue. Can you give us a quick summary of what disclosure is, and then we're going to talk about why it costs so much?
Okay. So disclosure is you telling or disclosing to the other person everything about your finances, if it's financial, or everything relating to the child and your health or whatever, if it's children. And that would be all your bank accounts, your super balances, just everything. You've really got to come clean to the other person and send them copies. Both sides have to do that for each other. And when the documents that each of you has is enough for you to either make an offer or assess whether an offer is fair, when you get enough information that you can make that decision, then what disclosure is, that disclosure has then achieved its aim.
Okay, so let's look at the cost of that. So you're saying disclosure is providing, and we've got a downloadable checklist if anybody wants it, of all of the things that you do need to disclose, but it's providing a lot of documents. Like it's not just a couple of pages, it's a lot. And people always write to us, do I really have to send this through? How much does it cost to send your disclosure to a lawyer? How much does that bit cost?
Well, are we talking about your own lawyer?
Yes, your own lawyer.
They've got to do it. They've got to read it once you hand it over to them. So it's they're not just like blindly passing it on.
Okay,
to understand your case.
You've got to pass it to your lawyer, who's then got to read it, who then will pass it to their lawyer.
Yes.
Okay, so your lawyer will charge you for reading it and passing it on.
Let's say you send a bundle of documents and your lawyer takes 30 minutes reading it, and our mythical $660. So that'll be $330.
Okay, if it takes them half an hour to read all your disclosure, it's going to cost you $330.
That's right, if you've got a $660 an hour lawyer. Then that all has to be uploaded into an online platform, and it needs to be indexed, and it'll have like actual hyperlinks, and then there'll be a letter usually sent to the other side saying, we've given you these documents. And that letter from the lawyer to the other person will also probably be about $60 plus GST, or maybe $120 plus GST. And
do you get charged for them indexing your disclosure and putting all that?
Yes.
Do you get charged for that?
And if it's the secretary that does it, there are hourly rates for secretaries. Look at them in your costs agreements, guys.
Okay. So that would be done hopefully, but hopefully your lawyer's not doing the indexing, because that's some basic stuff and we'll talk about the basic stuff you can do. All right.
And I'll just say though, there's a concept in cost that says where a lawyer does work that requires the skill of a lawyer, then that's one rate of fees. But if a lawyer does work that could have been done by a paralegal or a secretary, then they're not entitled to charge you their hourly legal rate, because, like you say, anyone could have done it in the office.
Yes. But sometimes they do. You're saying they're not entitled to charge you if it's a court
not the same
cost
amount, right? So so it used to be, I think the secretary was $80 an hour, and so if they spent an hour, it'd be $88, including GST, something like that. That's just a thing to remember with your stuff. If you're finding your legal fees are looking a bit high, maybe chip your lawyer or mention that this didn't need you to do this. this could have been done by your secretary. Or
and I think it's
by you yourself.
Yes, and we'll talk about some things that you guys can do yourself. But it's also important to note, I think, with disclosure, because if you do hand one bundle to your lawyer, they're going to charge you to read it. But if you hand them a bit and then another bit and then another bit and then another bit and another, over time, they're still going to have to charge you
a lot more. It's going to be a lot more because you're going to be charged for 6 minutes for reading a document, even if it took 1 minute to read. But also be careful. So you might think, I'll give my disclosure in a lump and then my lawyer can spend 30 minutes. That's very economical.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't leave it too long because the process of disclosure starts from the minute people start contemplating separation, and your obligation arises then. And the longer you delay before you start sending stuff to the other side or to your lawyer to pass on, the worse it looks for you. And sometimes people build up a massive pile of documents, metaphorically, and send it all at once. And then the lawyer's got a problem because they look at it and they go, that's going to be about 2 or 3 hours reading for me. I've got to find a 2 or 3 hours slot in my busy schedule to read it. And so it may not get looked at for quite some time. I mean, lawyers are only human and they're just trying to balance their work.
So what you need to be doing is being organised.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to drip feed the disclosure, but also try not to just dump it all at the last second on them. Be prepared before you see a lawyer. And if you can try and organise your disclosure yourselves, and we'll talk about how to do that later, and that will save you. So disorganisation can be a reason why some people's divorces become expensive. We didn't touch on, though, if your ex, like you said, is doing that drip feeding. Your ex gives their disclosure to that lawyer and then the lawyer gives a disclosure to your lawyer. Does that cost you as well?
Only when your lawyer reads it and then sends you a link or tells you what's coming.
So your lawyer
has
to read it?
Yeah.
So it's pretty much double.
Yeah. The way that if you want to know what a lawyer has to do and doesn't have to do, think of this. If the lawyer didn't read that document from you or from the other side and something went badly wrong, any conduct board, and the Law Society, for instance, would be saying to the lawyer, that's negligence. You should have read that document. So they have to read it. You might not think they do, but they absolutely do. But this idea of having disclosure very early on in your proceedings is good because each person should, if people act properly, each person should know what the other person has got. But sometimes it's used as a delay tactic, like you say. It's used to run up costs and it gets very expensive. And that's where you get your people who say, I've spent $30,000 and we haven't even gone to mediation. I think of all of the things that have changed, I think that disclosure is brilliant, but I feel that it has increased the costs to parties before they even get to the court. And I think that's why we're seeing so many people self-representing.
Don't worry, we've got a strategy for you. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Mediation costs. You just talked about mediation. That's another area where people spend legal fees. So let's think about that. And we have done a whole episode just recently on how to choose a mediator. And we've talked about the difference between free mediation and private mediation. So go and listen to that. But that is one of the differences. You've got to pay a mediator in some capacity to do that job. And you can pay mediators who cost $10,000 and mediators who cost $200. So there is that scale.
Yes.
Right? But then there's also the fees to pay your lawyer to go to mediation. So how much is that?
Well, if this mythical mediation, right, you've got a mid-range mediator, $5,000 for the day, $2,500 by you, $2,500 by the other side. Then if you take your lawyer, you will be there at 8 or 8:30 in the morning. You will stay, usually it breaks for lunch for an hour and then goes on until 5. So you're there, say, actively working for 8.5 hours. Right, and the lawyer's hourly rate at $6.60 is what? 30.
Do you want me to get my calculator out? Okay, hang on. Okay, what did you say it was again?
8.5 hours.
8.5 times 6. 60 equals $5,610. Plus
So
the mediator. How much is the mediator?
he was about $5,000.
Plus 5,000. Okay, so that's 10,000.
Yes, and you
what
haven't
about-
even got an
Yeah.
outcome.
And what about preparation costs?
No, don't go there yet.
Oh,
Because
okay.
one of the questions I'm being asked all the time
Yeah.
is, do I have to take a barrister to mediation?
True. That is a
So-
question we get asked all the time.
All the time. Now, barristers didn't used to get involved in mediations. They just didn't, right? Their expertise is in court and talking. But sometimes it happens that you get wind that your ex is going to bring a barrister, and your lawyer might be saying, I think we need a barrister too. And if they do, then that barrister may be $7,000 a day, $10,000 a day. They'll definitely be more than your lawyer, but it's on top of your lawyer's fees. And most barristers won't attend without being instructed by a lawyer. So what number are we up to now?
I made them $7,000 a day, so
Yeah.
it's $17,610, and I want to vomit. And we're not doing this to try and scare you away.
No.
This is what actually people are paying, but you don't have to do it this way,
Mm.
but this is an option. And then we're also not talking about the mediation preparation costs. So there are forms that you need to fill in. There's just the meeting beforehand, the strategies, the discussions, those things as well. You know, that could add up to 20 grand.
Yes.
If you went with a barrister, a private mediator, it was $6.60 an hour
Mm-hmm.
for the day.
For 8 hours. And then you don't have any guarantee of an outcome, because it may be that you guys mediate your hearts out all day long and walk out with nothing decided. And that's distressing and depressing. The court you must do mediation for children's matters unless you're exempt in a family dispute resolution situation. But I'm talking mostly about property here, and it's hard.
Look, I think if you're going to spend that much money on a mediation, you need to make sure you 100% understand the law in that area. You understand what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, and having unrealistic expectations and not understanding your ex and their divorce personality type can put you really in a big hole in legal fees, because if you walk in there thinking that throwing money at this is going to make it go away, and it doesn't, could be heartbreaking. However, ironically, it can sometimes be the way to avoid court, and it can be the way to keep your legal costs down in the end. Again, depending on the type of divorce you've got, and if you understand what you're asking for is fair and reasonable and it is going to actually happen. It's a balance, and you need to understand your divorce type. You need to understand what you're asking for, and you need to have your head around it. And I put my hand up. I stupidly took a QC, they were called QCs at the time, or a KC now, a barrister and a lawyer. Two lawyers. And I still didn't get an outcome. And I spent so much money. And if I'd actually sat down and understood the situation, understood where it was going to go, I would not have paid for those guys to be sitting in there, because they all just look at you. And they all want you to do all the work. And I was like, well, I could have probably done this without you guys and could have had the same outcome. So, you know, everyone's situation is different, but it is something you need to talk about.
Look, everyone needs to understand there is an option of having a half-day mediation with most people, and you will know by lunchtime if you're getting anywhere or not. And it can be continued outside, or you can extend maybe. But you don't have to do the whole day. And you really will kick yourself if you waste all that money and then one day find yourself before a judge without a lawyer because you wasted your money in the early stages.
And we've got an episode on, do you need to do mediation with a lawyer? Can you do it without a lawyer? Go listen to that episode as well. All right, let's talk about some other costs people don't get told about that I want everyone to be aware of. And this is doing my head in that it's still a thing, but you're invited to our free webinar. Whether you're stuck at the beginning of deciding to divorce, or you're struggling to find your way through the legal jargon and fear of the unknown of the legal process, we are here to empower you to take control. Join us to learn what steps you can take, followed by a live Q&A where you get Lynn, my amazing mum, and family law accredited specialist to answer your questions. All you have to do is go to www.thedivorcecourse.com.au and click on Reserve My Seat. We'll see you there. Hurry, spaces are limited, so don't miss out. Register today. Let's talk about some other costs people don't get told about that I want everyone to be aware of. And this is doing my head in that it's still a thing, but photocopying?
I know.
Scanning?
Yeah.
Oh, file notes? Phone calls we've talked about, reading documents, like literally, Mum, you've talked about this process before, but I just want to make it very clear to people. If you send them an email, the lawyer will charge you to read it.
Yes.
The lawyer will then charge you to draft one.
A response.
A response. The lawyer will then charge you to hear your response back before they do anything about it. So it is a very expensive process with lawyers, writing letters, reading documents, reading emails, photocopying, scanning. How much is it to scan a document according to the court these days? Let's have a look.
It shouldn't be much because, again, it has to be done. It shouldn't be done by the lawyer. Do you know, when I was in practice and before we had the internet in the olden days, I would sit with the client and we would decide on a strategy, and I would tell them the letter I was going to write, and I'd do like really rough writing, and I'd say, if I send one like that, what do you think? And they go, yes. I would write the letter and send it and copy them in. So there wasn't as much back and forth over a letter. But nowadays with email, people bounce it back all the time.
According to the Family Law FCFCA website, and this is their scale of fees, which you're saying lawyers don't follow, they go higher.
Hardly anyone has those fees. We always have more.
Okay, so scanning a document, if reading is not necessary, is $4.69 per 100 words.
Yes, I remember those days.
Okay, and photocopying or reproduction of a document, which is the other type of scanning, is $1 per page.
Yep.
So if you send your bank statements for 3 years, that's a lot of scanning.
It is.
And that's a lot of dollars.
Yeah. So the scale rate for a lawyer in that family court scale of costs, 108, item 108, time reasonably spent by a lawyer on work requiring the skill of a lawyer is $331 per hour, and that includes GST. So they're pretty way off beam. And then the time reasonably spent by a clerk or a lawyer on work other that then needed, I guess, to be a lawyer is $194.95, not $69 an hour. It's weird.
But in the real world, it's pretty much double or triple that, depending on where you are in Australia.
And I don't know if anyone counts hundreds of words. I used to when we used to do a physical bill, but most lawyers now are on computers.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And we haven't got to court, and I'm going to put a link to the court stuff because there are the pricing of all of the court stuff.
So unless you've got a costs agreement with your lawyer, that's supposed to be the amount they charge. But I think nearly every family law firm that I've heard of over the last few years has a costs agreement because the lawyers would starve on that, because you've got to think they've got premises. I'm not being an apologist for high fees, but you're paying for many years of training and experience, plus all of the support people that support the lawyer in their work.
Okay. So here are some things I think you could be adding up your bills without you realizing it. Okay. Sending a 20-page email to your lawyer, unnecessary. Sending them late night messages, being really upset, which I understand. That this is a thing. Sending documents separately instead of together can bite you in the bum.
Yeah.
And your ex may do something that is so upsetting. And that's going to happen more than once.
Yep.
In your divorce, without a doubt, even if you're amicable. But sending that email to your lawyer from your phone at midnight is going to cost you. It's going to cost you. So really, we've got some strategies. We'll talk about them again at the end, but just there's some little ones that are going to bite your bottom. I will put a link to the fees, and just remembering lawyers usually double or triple the cost of that. Okay, so we talked about mediation.
Yep.
Let's talk about other ways people lose money in divorce, Mum.
Okay, so when you hear someone who says, I've been 3 years and $300,000 and I still haven't got an outcome, the way they've wasted money is not believing that their ex is the person that their ex is telling them they are. If you can't negotiate an outcome and they're playing up about disclosure, hanging on before you go to court and continually sort of having Groundhog Day, give me this, delay, give me this delay, or no, so you're allowing the other person to set the agenda, and every time they write a letter, you pay money. That is a mistake that people can make. So if you've got a person who's going to play up and there's no reasonable prospect of settling, then don't waste too much time and money on correspondence back and forth. They've shown you who they are, believe them. And going to court, whilst it's scary, does set you on the path to ending. And you can always negotiate underneath. I think people get as scared for mediation as they do for going to court. But really, I think you've got a better chance of an outcome with court. At least you know there's an end to it.
Let's just think about some other things that blow out people's costs. Fighting over low-value items, so furniture fights. That's going to cost you a lot of money. Go and listen to our episode on how to deal with furniture, keeping your costs down. Revenge litigation. They are some horrible people in the world who use the family law process as a post-separation abuse mechanism. Okay, so financial and legal abuse, that is something, unfortunately, that can run up your bill. But you can choose strategies, and we'll talk about them in a minute, to protect yourself from that. Using your lawyer as a therapist, great way to blow up your bill, and it's such a waste of time because lawyers have no idea about psychology. I mean, I reckon they've got a pretty good idea about how to negotiate with certain types, but no clue on how to help manage your anxiety and fears. So go and see an actual therapist, and that'll cost you less. Trust me. Sometimes people are just super stubborn and they've been told the advice. They've heard it and they don't want to believe it. They think it's unfair. So they want to keep fighting, even though what they've been told by maybe one or two or three lawyers is what it is. Do you see that, Mum?
Yeah, I do see that. And I think that that's one of the kindest things or best things a lawyer can do to their client is speak to them about their prospects of success, and particularly if they're at risk of costs. But also your client, they may be hurt, very hurt, and they don't want to give in on these things. But that's another issue. So if you have a case, the most you should do, I think, is either get a second opinion or ask for some cases to show you how the law works in that area. Because if you're not going to get it, even if it breaks your heart, it'll break your heart a lot more if you go all the way to trial, spend $100,000 or more and still don't get it, and plus the potential of getting the other side's legal fees. You have to know when to just let go of stuff.
And sadly, and this is going to be a big punch in the gut to a lot of our listeners, I know, some people think that going through the legal system is a way to get their ex to apologise for their behaviour, or a way to get their behaviour exposed and named and shamed by the system. But in family law, it doesn't really do that. It really, it's just looking at numbers and facts and figures for property, and it's looking at
children
and
your capacity to parent.
And unfortunately, there's no
retribution. There's
restorative justice. I've been hearing a bit about it, where there's other ways that you can get that, but it is a reason that cases carry on for such a long time. So that is something to keep in consideration. Of course, if there's coercive control of family violence and that affects children's matters and property, that's where that is. But there's no decision being made between you and your ex on who's the good one and who's the bad one. It just doesn't happen in that sense.
No, because it's no blame, no fault, divorce process. Property, if a person's behaviour has been reprehensible, it may get mentioned in passing by the judge. You may get an adjustment in your favour because of that behaviour, but no one's ever going to pronounce that one or other of you is right and the other one is wrong, because they've got to walk a very fine line in balance, and it's not their job.
Right. Now, I think we completely forgot, how much does it cost to file your consent orders?
Oh, okay, that's a good point.
And an application for consent orders, to file it in the court yourself, is $205. How much does the court say a lawyer can charge to file an application for consent?
I think it's part of that lawyer's work. So drafting a document, $25.59 per. So you draft it. That's item 101. If anyone's following along, $25.59 for 100 words, and then producing it in a printed form is $8.73 per 100 words. And then drafting and producing a letter, $29.38 per 100.
So roughly,
just how long it takes and how many pages it is.
Okay. But roughly it's going to be
about,
what?
We talked about it. I think it's
Couple
around
of thousand.
So I think we did do the maths, Laura, and I think we came up with an amount maybe $3,500
to $4,000.
$4,000. But that is predicated on both of you being happy. You and your ex have an agreement. You have sufficient knowledge of the other person's finances that you don't want your lawyer to see it, don't need the lawyer to see it.
Okay, so if you're amicable, disclosure has been done appropriately without any absolute drama at all, and you did it without the lawyer's involvement, but you get the lawyer to draft your consent orders and file them, it's going to cost you about $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that's not including meeting with the lawyer to start with and any letters that may need to go back and forth.
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't cover your court filing fees.
I have yet to meet someone who has only spent $4,000 on lawyers getting consent orders. I find that really hard to believe. But okay, let's talk about how to be smart about legal costs. Okay. So everyone will be panicking, saying, and I'm sure people's exes say, let's not use lawyers. They make things worse. Just do this ourselves. But you would be insane to not at least see a lawyer once to find out where you stand. Because like Mum always says, this is a business transaction now. You are acting like a business, and you would never sign a contract to sell a bit of your business to somebody else unless you've got a lawyer to look at it at least once or find out where you stand. So you need to be strategic about when you use your expert lawyer and when you don't. And Mum, where are some ways that people can actually save money in this journey?
I think the disclosure stage. I do think that, because even if all you've done is your disclosure and sent it all over, and the other side hasn't done theirs, at least that's some of the work done in terms of communicating it to the other side. If you've set up a Google Drive or whatever sort of drive you want, then you've set up the process.
So if you don't use a lawyer for the disclosure phase, you're going to save yourself, at least, $3,000?
Oh, thousands.
$4,000, $5,000. And we hear people say, I've spent $20 on disclosure. I've spent $30 on disclosure. Yeah. That's something you could probably avoid.
Yeah. So you need to find out where you stand, of course, with the lawyer. But with the disclosure, again, even if you've only done your side, you've made the work easier. But if you've done the other side's work as well, then you are able to say, we've at least agreed on this and we've set up the system. You'll save yourself thousands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely spend your money on seeing a lawyer and finding out where you stand. And the other thing you can do is don't just go to the lawyer.
And
don't
throw
just
your hands
walk
up.
in and go, tell me what I need to know.
Yes.
Because the lawyer's going to go, well, I don't know what you need to know because I don't know your situation.
Yes.
So you've got to walk in there prepared and have some idea first. So educating yourself, and we talk about this in the webinar, the things that you can do before you go and see a lawyer. So if you want to come along to our webinar, we'll tell you exactly what you can prepare yourself to go into that. So you have that one meeting, one meeting that's going to cost you $660 to go in there and say, here's my situation. Here's what I think. What do you think? And the lawyer's going to go, wow, you're amazing, like they do for all our members. And they say, this is the best client I've ever had in my life. And here's what
True
I
story.
think. And then they get up and they walk out of that door and they have saved themselves maybe $10,000 just to avoid all of that drama just to start with.
Yep.
So that is something that you can do. You know, there are lawyers that say, I will only see you if you put this much money in trust. How much money do people usually ask for in trust, Mum?
Oh, it's $3,000 or $5,000 these days.
Okay. But there are other lawyers who will see you for a one-off.
And you pay one-off.
Reduced rate.
Yep.
And if you can go and do that, the other place that you can save money is in the negotiation phase. That backward and forwarding letter writing stuff that you and your ex could potentially do safely, if possible, yourselves via email. You may come to some agreements of things that your lawyer would have had to have done for you, which were a no-brainer, no-brainer agreements.
Yeah.
Do you really want to pay a lawyer to write a letter to get a no-brainer agreement on the stuff? Or would you rather just pay the lawyer for the stuff you're stuck on?
Yeah. And that's the point, Laura, that people they should do as much as they can before they go to see the lawyer. Obviously, the lawyer does, as you say, the bit that you're stuck on. The same philosophy goes for court. Once you have got a lawyer and you're into perhaps the mediation phase and that, all of the obvious concessions and agreements should be made so that when you actually go to court, if you have to, it's kind of just that really hard end bit that the court needs to adjudicate. Or if you go to court with a fairly big problem, along the way, you solve things. And then there's just that little inside bit that no one can crack and you need a judge.
Yeah. And the reason we do these episodes really is because, one, people don't do anything because they're so afraid of how much it's going to cost. And we're saying you can do a lot of this yourself. You can do the mediations yourself. You can prep yourself. You can educate yourself. Come along to our webinar and learn the things that you can do, to make yourself as aware and to educate yourself so it is cheap as possible for you. Oh, no. And then you've got the people who weren't too afraid to spend too much money at the start, and then they end up in court, and then they have to have no choice but not spend any more money because they've run out. And then they're in front of a judge trying to navigate the court system by themselves. Mum, just one more thing on legal fees. Who pays for the legal fees? Because you're going through divorce, you're going to get property settlement. Do the legal fees get included in the property pool, like as a debt, or what?
By and large, you will each pay your own legal fees. That's the philosophy of the court. What they say is that it says each party to a proceedings under this Act is to bear their own costs. That's Section 114 B for Bravo. And it goes on about it. In rare occasion, it talks about situations where a person on the other side may have to pay some of your legal fees, or even on a very rare occasion, on an indemnity basis, which is everything you ever spent on it. But you shouldn't count on it, right?
That's if they've misbehaved. That's if they've been naughty or done something wrong. They really do. But they rarely do that, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So generally, if you're spending money on a lawyer, then that's going to come out of your share of the property pool. You're not going to get that added back.
So if let's just be really basic. If there's $100 in the property pool.
Yes.
And it never is, but if the split ends up being 50-50, but you spent $25 on lawyers, and they spent $10 on lawyers.
Yeah, it's $25 and they'd end up with $40, wouldn't they?
Okay, so the legal fees go on to
your own ledger.
Own ledger. So you pay your legal fees. It comes out of the property pool as you're on your side. Okay, so what we're really trying to point out here is it's expensive. Now, I'm going to pop up the family law legal fees for you. Now, there is actually exemptions that you can ask for when it comes to the filing. When it comes to actual court fees, there are exemptions. So I'm going to list that, and we'll do a whole episode on that in the future, Mum.
Yeah.
But there is the family court guide to how much lawyers should be charging, but that's not what your lawyer will be charging.
No.
And when you sign up, your lawyer will give you, usually, don't they, Mum, some sort of summary?
That's what you will sign. And the court has ordered now that every time a person goes to court or even to mediation, then your lawyer has to give you a cost to date, how much for the session today, and how much it will cost going all the way through, so that people go in with their eyes wide open.
But don't worry, we exist and we can help you. And so if you come along to our webinar, we're doing it next week. We take you through the 5 biggest mistakes people make in divorce and how to avoid them. And at least 2 or 3 of those, we give you some very good strategies on how to prepare and how to do these things yourself. Yeah. Okay, so we can show you the way, and that will help you keep your legal fees down. But I didn't know any of this. I remember I turned up to the lawyer's office. I just emptied out the filing cabinet and carried it into Woolworths bags and just gave it to her. In hindsight, that would have cost me so much money. Like, I just thought, wow, lawyers are so expensive. But I was making my lawyer expensive.
A lot of it you were, darling. And I think you probably had receipts for Barbie dolls and repairs to the washing machine.
Yes, and she had to sort through it all. So, I mean, that's the stupidest thing you could ever do, and I did it. So don't think you could ever do something as stupid as me. But there are things that you can avoid doing, and we will show you those things.
And if our listeners, Laura, if they're hearing this after May, I guess, 2026, if we don't have our webinar on, send us an email for the next one.
And we'll help you. Yeah. So come along to the webinar. Let's sort this out. We will not be talking as much boring about legal fees, but the schedule will be in there. Make sure you talk to your lawyer about it. We'll show you some strategies next week. Live, you can ask Mum some questions. You can ask me some questions, or you can just come along and say g'day, because we never actually get to hear from you guys except for when we do the webinars, and we don't do them very often. So I would love for you to come along. If you'd like to register, just go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and you can click up the top, register my seat, and come along. Or you can just jump on social media and just DM us the word webinar and we'll send you the link that way as well. But love to see you there. And Mum and I are looking forward to showing you guys all the things I did wrong and the things that you should definitely not do, so that you don't make mistakes that other people it's basic stuff that if people just said, hey, Laura, don't carry those bags of disclosure into your lawyer's office. Just sit down and do it yourself. It's going to cost you $1 per page, you dope. So, these guys aren't that silly. But there are other things that I wish I'd known. So we're sharing all of that information with you in our webinars. So come along, and thank you, Mum, for your time. And we will see everyone here next week.
Thank you, Laura. Bye, everyone.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.